Questions from the audience?
We had a very similar experience in that we're married to extreme left brains and we're extreme right brains. And one thing that I went through that was, I think would be helpful for other people to have that experience is how, when you're the right brain, you're in all the feelings. So you got the good feelings, but then the left brain, sometimes they get upset at you. And so how can you live in that situation without allowing that to affect how you feel? What are the ways that you can work with that, with thinking about without causing yourself to be digging yourself out of a hole every day?
Okay. Well, there's a couple of tools you can use that will help. One of them is in your language as you communicate. Don't communicate in the framework of what the other person is doing wrong. Communicate within the framework of how you feel. In other words, instead of saying, you make me feel bad, you see, just say, I feel bad. Or, what that sort of tone or, that subject makes me feel bad. So in other words, you try to get rid of the being accusatory and pointing the finger, saying that somebody else is a problem. And if you can get your significant other to agree with that they'll do the same thing. Instead of pointing the finger and say, you make me feel this, you make me feel that, you're doing this and that, don't accuse, rather just say how you feel. This is how, when you do these things, this is how I feel. And yes, I own it. It's not you make me feel this way. I feel this way because of the way I am. You see? So that'd be one thing in the conversation in general, get both parties to agree that each one will tell the other how they feel rather than blame each other for what's going on, because it's just another way of looking at the conversation that diffuses it from being accusatory. And you've already taken a big problem away then, because what happens if you accuse somebody else, you tell them, well, that's wrong, that's not good for this reason, rather than, well, when you say that, it makes me feel this way, because that's the way I am and that's the way I work. Because as soon as you point the finger at somebody else, they get defensive. And you've pointed the finger at them, then they'll look for some way to point a finger at you to tell you that you're wrong, and then you'll tell them that they're wrong, that you're wrong, and it just escalates to be a problem, a much bigger problem than if it does if both people are just saying how they feel and owning that their feelings are because of them. That's their choice to feel that way. They could feel differently, but that's how they feel right now. This is how that makes me feel. And then you're actually saying things to each other that are useful. You see? Because a lot of times, particularly between male and female, particularly between right and left brain people, they don't put the same meanings to the same words. If you say something and you don't mean anything hostile, you don't mean anything derogatory, but they hear it that way. And when they say things, they don't mean anything hostile or derogatory, but you take it that way. You see? You may have a tendency to take things personally. If somebody says, this is a problem, you immediately hear, you've created a problem. They didn't say you created the problem. They just said, this is a problem. But if you take it personally, then you feel like they're accusing you of creating the problem. You see what I mean? So it's your interpretation is what creates your reality. So in your reality, you just got accused of creating a problem when that wasn't the case at all. So these are the things, that you can work on to realize that the way you feel about it is your responsibility. It's because of the way you are. And you have to realize that that other person is the same way. The way they feel about it is the way they are. And now you have to decide to have a conversation in such a way that you allow them to be who they are and they allow you to be who you are, and then start from there to work out differences in issues. Because as soon as it gets personal, it's just going to devolve into something ugly, and it will never solve anything. It'll just make everything worse. So that kind of an approach is good, not just for right brain, left brain, male, female. That's good just in general with people. Realize people are who they are. And don't jump to any conclusions. If they say, well, there's a problem, don't jump to the conclusion that they think you're the problem or that they think they're the problem. They've just stated a fact. There's a problem. So instead of getting defensive, you might say, yeah, I think so too. Let's talk about it. You see, rather than defend yourself because you think they're accusing you of something. So we need to get our, we need to just talk in as much factual as we can, and we need to not ascribe to other people the way we would the way we would think if we said that. Oh, if I said that to somebody else, it would only be because I was angry at them and I was pointing, that there were a problem. But somebody else may say that same thing but not have that. You see, we project ourselves on other people. So you say something to me and I interpret it. I don't know you so well as to interpret exactly how you feel and what you're thinking. So I interpret it to be what I would feel and be thinking if I had said that to somebody. You see, so we interpret what other people are saying in terms of what we would mean if we said that. And that's not true. Between male and female, between right and left brain, that's just not true. So they're talking, but we're interpreting as if we were talking. And that creates the problem. So there's a communication problem here. You see, your reality is created by your interpretation of the data. So remember that. It's not necessarily what's out there, it's how you're interpreting the data. So don't think that because don't think that what you interpret has to be what's there. It's just your interpretation. Have the idea that your interpretation could be wrong. So instead of getting upset, you might say, are you saying that, that I have created this problem? Not because, you saying I'm doing this? Not that way, but, was this what you, and the other person may say, oh no, I just was saying that there's this problem we need to talk about. You see, now you've pulled one of the, just taken one problem and diffused it. So never think that you understand what somebody else is saying without actually asking them, without exploring it, without whatever. If you jump to anger or jump to defense or jump to, it's unfair and that sort of thing, if you immediately land on some negative space, then that's not a conversation, really. That's you interpreting reality, you believing that whatever you interpret is the truth and the only way it could possibly be, and then going from there. And mostly that's wrong. If you were only communicating with somebody who was just like you, that would mostly be right. You could do that. That's why when you talk with your best friend, you see, it's different. When you talk with your best friend, you don't have any of those problems because they're pretty much like you. That's why they're your best friend, you see? So you have the same metaphors, you have the same attitudes, you interpret data the same way, and there's very seldom any problem develops there. But as soon as you talk to somebody who comes from a different viewpoint, which you get between male and female, which you get between right and left brain, which you get between cultures. You just talk to somebody from a totally different culture, and it's the same thing. You don't use the same metaphors. You don't mean the same things by the same words. You have different interpretations, and you just have to have some conversation. Before the conversation turns angry, you have to have some polite conversation to really understand where each other are coming from. So yes, take somebody who is, if you're right brain, take somebody who's left brain, who's male. Well, now you got two things together that are not really the same way that you see the world, and then put them in another culture. They're from, rural China or someplace, give them another culture and try to have a conversation with them. It'll be really, really hard because you just won't. You'll say one thing, they'll interpret it as something else. They'll say something, you'll interpret it as something else. And if you tend to have some ego there, then you tend to get defensive quickly. If you don't have that ego, then you're not so defensive and you can just talk. So a lot of that terrible conversation that you have is just because you're not really communicating. You're talking past each other. And everybody's got ego. Everybody's ego's invested in not being wrong, right? Defensive. Not me, it's somebody else is the problem, obviously not me, because you're never the problem. It's always somebody else that's the problem. That's just the way we see things. It's a difficult thing, talking with people who see the world differently than you do. So be patient and let them be who they are. Accept that. They don't have to be the way you are to be okay. See, many of us will only think somebody else is okay if they're like us. If they're like us, then they're good people. They're smart. They understand things. That means they believe the same things we believe, you see. And people who don't believe the same things we believe or see the world the way we do, well, those people seem to be kind of out of it. They're lost, whatever. So we judge everybody based on ourselves. If they're like us, they're good. If they're not like us, they've got problems. And they do the same with us. So that would be probably the best solution. If you're really, if you're in a relationship with somebody who's very different than you, let them be different. Realize they are a different way than you. They don't see the world your way. Try to see it their way. How do they see the world? Try to figure out what they really mean when they say something. Explore it before you get angry, before you get upset, before you want to be defensive. Explore it and see. Try to understand it from the other person's viewpoint. See it from their viewpoint. And when you run into a problem where their viewpoint just doesn't make sense, which means it doesn't agree with your viewpoint, you see, realize that they just are who they are. Everybody isn't going to share your viewpoint of how to interpret things and understand things. And you have to allow that to be. You have to not have the idea that whatever my viewpoint is, that's the right viewpoint, and anything that differs than that is the wrong viewpoint. That's ego. That's arrogance. I'm right. If you disagree with me, you just don't understand or you're wrong. See? So getting rid of your own ego is a big step in that direction. Just let other people be how they are. Don't judge if that's right or wrong. Just let them be. Everybody's on their own path doing the best they can with what they've got. They've got lessons to learn. You've got lessons to learn. Let that be okay. Don't try to put it in terms of right or wrong, or who's right, who's wrong, who's got the right idea. It's not that this is a contest and there's going to be a winner. If it's a contest and there's going to be a winner, what actually will happen is there will be two losers, not a winner. So that should help in your relationships with everybody, not just your significant other. But we tend to do that. I mean, we come to our conclusions because we've decided those are correct. And we hold them because we believe that they are right. So therefore, anybody who disagrees with us is wrong. And that's arrogant, and that's ego. Just let other people be. It's okay if other people don't see it your way. It's okay that everybody else can be wrong but you. You know, that's all right. Let people be wrong. They're on their own path. You know, they have to learn it themselves. You're not everybody's teacher. Let them go and learn it on their own. So if everybody else is wrong but you, accept that's okay. That's really all right. And then have in the back of your mind the possibility that maybe you are not the definer of right and wrong. That maybe the picture's bigger than that.
Just one little last piece.
Okay.
As the one that's embedded in a lot of feeling, then usually the left brain, they're a lot of times they're not. Mm-hmm. And when they are feeling bad, as they're dealing with their fear and their struggle, could you talk just a little bit about how to keep yourself from going there? Because it's so easy for some people.
Okay. Well, the people who are very left brain try very hard not to have feelings, and if they have them, they often ignore them. If they see that they have them, they try to stuff them away. Just because in their mind, it's only rational to not give voice to emotional stuff that isn't really well thought out. Feeling stuff is like undependable. You know, you may change your mind later, you might, whatever. So if you're an intellectual and you're very left brain, that feeling stuff just gets in the way. It muddies the water. So you suppress that. Okay, well, that doesn't mean that these people don't have feelings. It doesn't mean that they don't have strong feelings. It means that they don't express their feelings. They still have those feelings in there, but they don't get up to the intellectual level where they're really aware of it so much. And as soon as they're aware of it, they hold it down, you see. So it's not they don't have feelings, it's just that they have found feelings to not be rational. And they want to be rational. So the feelings have to be put aside because feelings are not rational. That's what a left brain person is. A left brain person is very rational. If it doesn't make sense, if it isn't rational, then they don't want it as part of themselves. So they toss that part away. But they do have feelings. And those feelings work their way out anyway. They just work their way out, like stuff oozes, through something that's porous. It doesn't pour out, but it just comes out anyway. And anger happens, and sometimes just to the point of having to walk away, having to leave, where they just can no longer deal with things the way they are. So that's the feelings. Their feelings are constipated, let's say. Yeah. So they get this over full feeling, kind of full of gas, but they can't let it loose because it's just not polite.
So that's my problem.
Yeah.
No wonder.
Yeah. Yes. So you have to let them be that way. That's the way they are, okay? And you have to see that, and you have to let that be, because what they're seeing, what that very left brain person is seeing in you, is that you're irrational. You're full of feelings. You're totally irrational. You're not making any sense. They can't process what you're saying because it's all over the place. It's kind of wild, and they need to work with rationality. They want to have a logical discussion, but you're not capable of a logical discussion. You're just all over the place, you see? And they don't know what to do with that. So they're just kind of standing there, don't know what to do with this person who's lost it and is all wrapped up in emotion. And what do I say? What do I do? So they'll say something like, well, that's not true. And what does that do? It wasn't true because it really wasn't even rational. That's not true. And what does that do? Well, the person who's upset and very emotional, that just pushes them up to the next level, right? And now they're twice as emotional and irrational. And, and the person, well, that was the only thing he could think to say was, well, that's not true, because there wasn't a good logical argument, therefore it's not true. You weren't doing logical arguments at the time, and they just are lost. Don't know what to do. Well, let's just sit here until it's over. That's strategy number 2. Let's sit here until, she gets rational again. And after she becomes rational again, maybe we can have a conversation, right? So that's the second strategy. Just wait it out or come back later. Oh, I got to go someplace now. Let's finish this tomorrow, something like that, sometime when you're in a better mood. You see? So you can see both parties are just missing the point both ways. That's the, and yeah. So nobody's really communicating with anybody. That's the problem. The left brain person needs to realize, well, yes, that person's upset. They are emotional. Emotions are not rational, that's true, but rationality isn't really as big a deal as they make of it. They make of it that if it's not rational, it's useless. That's not the case. Just because somebody's upset and emotional, that's telling you a lot about them, about how they feel, about how their reality is, how they see things. You see? There's a lot of information in those feelings. You have to take those feelings and understand them. You have to speak kind of feeling language, you see, and have some compassion. Realize that often they're not upset because they disagree with the facts. They're upset because the tone is wrong. The approach is wrong. The connection's been missed. The information isn't understood. And that's what's upsetting. And the left brain person doesn't even realize that any of that stuff exists. They think it's all about the facts. Well, it's not about the facts at all. It's about the attitude with which the facts are being dealt with, you see. So it's a wonder that anybody can ever communicate with anybody else, because all we do is interpret from our own viewpoint. And that's all we can do until we grow up enough to the point that we can actually see through the other person's eyes, until we can kind of feel where they are and what's going on. And there's a time for rational discussion, and there's time for intuitive discussion, for feelings. There's times for hugs. There's time for just holding someone. There's time to, there's a time for apologizing, even if you don't know what you're apologizing for. It doesn't matter, because now you're in an emotional space. You see? So you have to appreciate people that are different than you. And for that, you have to have empathy. You have to be able to see where they're coming from. And don't demonize them or think that they're awful or wrong or just intractable or somehow too dumb to understand or whatever, just because they don't see it the way you see it. Try to see it the way they see it. See it from their viewpoint. And you'll probably find out it's not nearly as bad as you thought it was. Same both ways. Just because you have somebody who's very emotional doesn't mean that they are, thinking horrible thoughts, ready to give up, ready to, push the explode button, and destroy everything, even though they kind of sound like that, that doesn't necessarily mean that's the way it is. They're just upset. And you have to deal with that first before you get to the rational part. The rational part, you can't get there until you deal with the part that's upset and why it's upset. And there's another thing that's very different between males and females, and that is males, their natural space that they work in is the outside world. That's their realm. They work in the outside world. Females tend to work on the inside world. The inside world is the world of relationship. Females use their intellects to work their relationships. They're very thoughtful about their relationships. Well, if I do this, how will that make them feel? You know, how will that relate? How do I connect? And they're thinking and they're working with their intellects in a relationship space. And in the outside world, not so much. I don't want to know how the car works. I just want to know what happens if I press this pedal and that pedal. I don't want to know the details, right? That outside space is not all that interesting. You just need to know how to work it. The rest of it is, somebody else will fix it. You know, it's not your thing. So in the inside space, men are like that. In the inside space of relationship, men have really not a clue. They don't have their intellects involved in that space. They come into that space kind of intuitively. They're just interacting the way they do. They're not really thinking about what's she feeling, what she's thinking. Why does she feel that way? You know, where is she coming from and all of this? Why is this upsetting? They don't think about it like that. Or if I say that, how will she take that? They just are. Just like the ladies are in that outside space. Don't tell me about the details. I just want to know how to work it. Well, that's the way they are in the inside space. So there's a real big difference there. Women know all the details of who's doing what to who, how and when. You know, all the connections, all the networking that's going around, all the silent things that are never said but are felt anyway. They've got all that. That's their space. Men don't have a clue about that. They're lost on that. If you want them in on what's going on, you'll have to tell them, you know, in complete sentences that are easy to understand. Otherwise they don't get it. Women are like that in the outside space. In the outside space where they have things that they have to manipulate or do or whatever, you need to tell them they need a lesson. Okay, we're going to have a lesson in, you know, operating this machine or something, and you do this and they'll practice and they can get just as good at it, but they don't look at the machine, kind of understand how it works and what it's doing and why it exists, and then work it. They need a lesson because they just don't connect with the outside world, the machines, the functions. The logic of it is not, they're not interested. They're not even interested in working it unless they need to. It's just not where they go. So you have totally different interests in those things. Men are very easy for women to manipulate in relationships because men are just kind of stumbling along in feeling space. They don't know. You know, I mean, all you women know that. It's really easy to manipulate men in a relationship space. It's simple. It's simple. But, you know, men find it very difficult to manipulate women in a relationship space because they own that space. They understand it and they're good at it. And we don't approach that space intellectually. We're all about, does it feel good or does it feel bad? It's about as detailed as we want to get. Anything beyond that is more than we really want to know. So there's just these basic differences of the way we see the world that makes it hard to communicate. But the thing is that male and female working together, doing the things that they do best, are just perfect match. I mean, it's just a hand in glove. It's a perfect connection They complete each other in a marvelous way. If you just can learn to, accept that everybody is just the way they are. And we don't need to remake them to be the way we are. Men are forever trying to remake their women into being logical, rational, people who understand the outside world. And women are always trying to remake their guys into sensitive, people who understand and appreciate the inside world. The inside world's full of feeling. The outside world's full of stuff. See? So, huh? Yeah. So that's kind of an idea of, right brain, left brain, male, female, people from China, people from, Europe. We have different realities, and it's really hard to connect, particularly if we have the attitude that they need to be like us, or they're wrong.
Well, that solves all the world's problems.
Yeah. Well, there was a joke I heard, I try to remember it, that was along this line. You've heard the joke about, if the tree falls in the woods and nobody's there to hear it, does it make a sound? Well, this was, there's a man alone in the woods and no woman is present. Is he still wrong?
Ask a question that's kind of a follow-up on that.
Sure, pass the mic.
I hesitate to bring up a controversial issue, but recently I was thinking about a world problem and reflecting on it from an MBT point of view. And I was thinking specifically of this whole issue of climate change and how, in some ways, the conversation or the relationship between the different groups of people seems similar to the conversation between people from different cultures or between males and females. And I've noticed that the people who approach things from a very left-brain scientific point of view are very, very angry and don't understand the people who have a very different perspective and who, we might say, are much more in favor of maintaining the status quo. And although I'm a city boy, when I was young, I spent time in a very rural area and got to know people there who very much depended on logging. And a lot of people in the city think logging is horrible. It's murdering the trees. It's killing the ecology. I understand that. But then I got to see it from the perspective of the rural people whose livelihood depended on it and couldn't really conceive a way of supporting themselves and indeed surviving if logging was banned. And it occurred to me that in an issue like climate change, that perhaps there needs to be more of an effort to, if you go, so to speak, to reach out to the other side of the aisle and really just try to understand non-judgmentally what the people on the other side of the debate are saying and why they're saying it. And an effort needs to be made to try to craft a win-win solution rather than demonizing those people and trying to crush them. It seemed to be better to apply the approach you're talking about, trying to understand the people whose livelihood depends on fossil fuels and trying to find if there, see if there's some way to help them sustain their lives, the quality of their lives, in a way that is a little less damaging to the planet. But I don't hear that kind of approach being debated or offered, in the councils of government.
No, we don't. And that's because, as I said before, there's so much more fear in the land now than there ever has been before. When there's fear, we tend to polarize. The fear polarizes us. So, it produces an us against them kind of mentality. So, the only solution that is a long-term solution is a win-win solution. A win-lose solution is not a good long-term solution. It may be a short-term solution as long as you can force it and maintain that force, but it's not a good solution. They need to be win-win solutions. We need to not, if you look at our culture, not only are we full of fear, but we're turning into almost a martial culture. Most of our movies and stories and books that we read are all about fighting and war and violence. And the thing the underlying theme there is that force wins. The way you solve a problem is you overcome it with force. That's the theme. And even if you look at the kid vid, the movies for 5 and 6 year olds, it's the fairies fighting the toads or something. It's still the same thing. It's violence and force, and you have the evil and you have the good, and they're fighting with each other. And it's not about, well, why are they evil and why are they good, and is there a way that everybody could live together? That's not the way the movie plot runs. The movie plot is that evil needs to be vanquished. And what's evil? Evil's everybody that disagrees with us. That's evil. See? So from the toad's viewpoint, the fairies are evil. And the fairies' viewpoint, the toads are evil. And everybody's trying to vanquish people who disagree with them, basically. And that's just a recipe for disaster. But that's because of fear. Fear polarizes things. And our politics have been polarized tremendously. We don't have thoughtful discussions about politics anymore. All we have is ranting. Anger is what we have. But there was a time, 50 years ago, that people sat down and actually discussed whether this or that way was a better approach in the short term and the long term, and there were discussions about these things. We don't discuss anymore. We're polarized. You're either out on this pole or out on that pole, and hardly anybody's in the middle. And that's not good. That's isolating us versus them mentality. And the way forward is that we're all us and we're all them. We need to learn to care about other people and their attitudes and their feelings and their livelihoods and their viewpoints. And we need to work with ways that everybody wins. And you may get in situations where you have some people who just won't change. It's a my way or the highway kind of thing. I'm right and you're wrong, and there's no way to discuss it in any other. Well, that's unfortunate, and you may have to leave some people like that standing on the sideline. But we as a culture, as a nation, as a human race, need to go the opposite direction. So that polarization we've had has been created, I think, because of the fear that goes with it, makes us easy to manipulate. Instead of having to rationally convince somebody that this is a better way to go and let them try to convince you that the opposite's a better way to go, if you can get people angry and upset, well, you can manipulate things. If you can control the mob, then you've got power. If you don't have a mob, if you've just got a bunch of people who would be interested in having an intelligent discussion, well, where's the power in that, you see? Well, that's where actually the power lies, but it's not, that's the long-term power. Short-term power is in being in control of the mob. So we use fear to manipulate people. More polarization, easier they are to manipulate. And then you pick up sides, right? Polarization means there's two sides. So then you only have 2 points, 2 sides to any argument. Well, that's not right. There's usually 10 sides to every argument. There's only 2 sides to every argument when it's polarized. And the feelings between those two is just anger on both sides. That the other side is stupid. Other side, needs to be eliminated. That's even worse. That's sad, but we need to back out of that. It doesn't take us anywhere good. Since we've been more polarized, probably the last, 20, 30 years than we have ever been, it's not like things have just gotten dramatically better, and not at all. Things have been slip-sliding away with that kind of an attitude. But all that's local. That can change in decades. It can change with basic attitudes. But it's the same thing, yeah, it's just a communication problem. Refusing to listen, I'm right, you're wrong. It's always been a problem. That's because you don't respect other people. You don't respect them unless they're like you.
Yeah, it's more about me than it's about you.
Yes. The whole thing is very self-centered. It's arrogant, self-centered. I know, you don't. If you disagree with me, you're obviously wrong.
Right.
And anything that I believe, I'm obviously right. You see, the thing about belief is that if you have a belief, that belief then defines a fact in your mind. If you believe it, it's a fact. So even though it isn't really a fact, it's just an opinion, but as soon as you believe it, that opinion becomes a fact. And once it's a fact, anybody who disagrees with that fact, well, they just don't understand, or they're stupid, or both. Most people don't say, well, a lot of my facts are just beliefs. They're not really facts at all, they're just opinions. People don't think like that. Everything that they think is right. Yeah, it's just self-centeredness is the issue. It's just the opposite of being other-centered. That's the problem. Quality of consciousness means getting rid of self-centered, making it other-centered. Caring, respecting other people. We've got a long way to go, don't we? Yeah. We've got a long way to go. Yeah.
Getting back to the topic of differences between men and women, or left brain, right brain, and this topic's come up a couple times with men not being able to multitask as well. And for myself, I feel like I'm an extreme version of that. Anytime I'm making decisions of any kind, I can't do a second thing at that same time. So driving in an unfamiliar area, it's like, don't talk to me, I can't listen to the radio. And I've kind of accepted that, like that's how I am. But do you think it's valuable to try to, develop the ability to multitask, or just kind of embrace the fact that being able to focus very intensely has its benefits, and just, kind of go with that?
Well, we're that way because that's how we genetically evolved, to be that way. Okay? Females multitask much more easily than men do. Men focus on very specific things much more easily than females do. While the women were taking care of children, and if you've ever taken care of a lot of young children at the same time, you'll know multitasking is absolutely essential. You've got to be doing if you've got 3 kids, you've got to be doing 3 things at the same time, all the time. And plus you're doing other things. You've got all the other tasks you have to do, plus these tasks, and multitasking is just a way of life. You'll learn to do that. Whereas if you are out trying to catch that rabbit or catch that deer or whatever, focus is what's required. You need to have the things that are important, and everything else is gone. You can't, that's not a place for multitasking. That's a place for being very focused. And if there's cooperation in that hunt, well, that cooperation has to be precise. You have to rely on it, and anybody that messes up is a problem. That's a different world to live in. That's the outside world versus the inside world. So women are good at that. Men are good at other things that women aren't. Men are much better at visualization in general than women, because visualization is a necessary tool for working with the outside world. Women are more at home in a feeling space. Women tend to be more right-brained. Men tend to be more left-brained. You have these tendencies, but a lot of it just comes out of our genetic heritage, our instincts. It's just the way we are. But yes, to answer your question, you can learn the multi-process. And it's good to be able to do both. Again, having both skills and integrate them as necessary is much better than having this set of skills or that set of skills. So if you can do both, that's good. But it's going to be harder for you to develop the multiprocessing. But you can develop it. Men can develop that skill just as women can develop the skill of focus. You just have to be in a position where you have to use those skills, otherwise you can't get your job done. And you can switch focus. You can even have a fairly tight focus, but you can switch it from this to this to this to this to this to this, and it's like time shared. You know how the computers used to do things in their core, right? They had 10 problems to work on, and they'd work on each one, and then they'd go to the next one, and there was some kind of queue that said which one was going to get worked on next. And the computer chip was very fast, and it looked like it was parallel processing everything, but it really was just sampling a lot of things very quickly. Well, that's kind of the way that men generally learn to parallel process. It's not really parallel processing so much as it is you can spread your attention to multiple focuses is what it works. I've always been, somebody that had a one-track mind. You focus on one thing and you focus intently on that one thing to the exclusion of everything else. So if somebody says something like, "Would you take out the trash?" You don't even hear it because you're focused on something else. It's not in your reality. Or if it does come into your reality, you dismiss it immediately because it's off task. You just don't hear those words. Whereas if you're a parallel processor, you hear everything. Right? You're sitting here having a conversation, and at the same time there's people talking over there, and you hear that too. And you listen to that conversation while you're talking to this conversation, and there's some other thing going on, and you get it all because you're parallel processing it. Now, whether you're really parallel processing it or whether you're just very quickly sampling, it really doesn't matter. They end up with the same sort of thing. But my being one-track mind got challenged when I was doing, I had 5 programmers working for me. I had a task to do, and I had 5 different pieces of software that I was developing, and I had these programmers doing the programming. And all of them were such that they needed me to connect to them and talk with them and explain things and what had to be done. And they'd get stuff back, printouts back, and this worked and this didn't, and why, and what do we do next? And I had all 5 of these going at once, and I could switch from one to the other and just immediately be in all of them. From 1 minute to another. I could talk with one and get right into detail and talk with another and do that. But it took me about 2 years to develop that skill. I developed it slowly because at first I just needed to do this, and when I was done with that, then I'd have lunch, and then I could go do this other thing. But I got to where I could switch among them in seconds and be just thinking about all of them at the same time. And that just took practice. It wasn't something that was natural to me. Just like for ladies to learn to be very focused on something and not pay attention to what's going on in their environment. Just pay attention to that, separate out all the variables that are important from the ones that aren't, and focus only there. They can do that too, but it takes practice for them. They have to work on that because immediately a little something goes over here, and part of their attention goes over to see what's that, instead of nothing happened. They don't even get it. Like we guys can do. We can focus on things and not hear. We turn off our everything else, and it's not there. But they can learn to do that too. But it's better to be able to do both, the parallel process and to focus intently. They're both really good skills that are necessary. So it is part of being male or female. It is part of our genetics. There's some species, most species, where the males and females all do about the same stuff, right? They're not really that different about what they go around and do during the day. Take dogs, female dogs, male dogs. Well, there's very differences between those two, but mostly dogs do dog stuff. And they do the same dog stuff. They run around, they bark, they chase squirrels, they do whatever they do, and the males do it and the females do it. And there's some differences, but mostly everybody does everything. With humans, more than most species, we specialized. That's what made Homo sapiens the dominant hominid, and we overran everybody else because we specialized in order to survive as a species. It was kind of, touch and go there for a while as whether or not humans were going to make it or become extinct. But we specialized, and suddenly we had the big advantage. And our specialization was all focused at creating new humans and keeping them alive long enough to be able to reproduce. So we had men doing certain tasks to do that, and females doing other tasks to do that. And the females didn't do those tasks, and the males didn't do those tasks. They specialized in that process, and by specializing, we were better at it than anybody else. And it's not that we overran the Neanderthals and chased them out of town. We just outbred them. We absorbed them because our young were more plentiful and they survived to reproduce better because we had specialization. The female specialized in having and taking care of the children. The men specialized in protecting them and in providing for them. And that was the breakout. And as long as everybody does everything, then you're limited. Henry Ford found that out, right? Specialization. You can make a whole lot more cars per day if you have a bunch of teams that are specialized at things rather than everybody builds a car, then everybody builds the next one. If you try to build the whole car, that's slow. If you have specialization, that's much faster, much more efficient. So partly male and female are different just because we were specialized to do different roles. And then we outnumbered. And in those days, power was numbers. If you had a lot of people, you had a lot of power. Or you had a lot of lions, they'd have a lot of power. If you had a lot of anything, a lot of power came with numbers. So we dominated because we outbred everybody. Women became baby-making machines. In other species, females only come into heat like twice a year. They can only get pregnant so often. That's good for them in a way because it doesn't wear them out. It doesn't, tie them down just to being with children quite as much. But with humans, it's not like that. So we specialized and changed from other animals in such a way as we could produce more people and have them survive better than anyone else. And that's why we were the winners in the hominid sweepstakes, because there was 5 or 6 different hominid species around besides us. And some of them were bigger and some of them may have been smarter, who knows, but we were better at reproducing and surviving. So that's the fundamental difference. It just is that way, but it's not a problem. You should just say, well, I'm good at focusing on things. Good, because there's a lot of problems in the world that the way you solve them is by focusing on them. There's other kinds of problems in the world that's much better if you can do 2 or 3 things at once. The one there sitting in the back, Pamela, she can't do one thing at a time. If she does one thing at a time, she'll fall asleep. So, she's playing with her dogs, listening to an audiobook and playing pet rescue all at the same time, because if she did just any one of those things, she wouldn't be able to stand it. It would just be too something. I don't appreciate that because I don't have that problem, but it would just be too something that she couldn't stand it. So she has to always be doing at least 2, preferably 3 things at once. So that's why it was very hard for her to read books. She had a lot of trouble reading books because reading books, you just got to sit there and read a book. You can't do anything else and read a book. But now audiobooks, wow, that's different. You can stick those headphones in your ear and you can do 2 other things while you're listening to that audiobook. You know, and suddenly Pamela has read more books probably in the last 5 or 6 years that she's been doing audiobooks than she did all the rest of her life multiplied times 10. You know, went from reading was just something she couldn't do because it required just one thing. She just couldn't sit there and read a book. But if she could listen to an audiobook while doing 2 or 3 other things, then that's okay. So it's not only that they can do it, in many cases, they need to do, they need to parallel process. They can't stand just doing one thing at a time. It's too inefficient. Okay. It's just our hardwiring. It's the way we evolved, for the most part. But yes, it's worthwhile learning the other skills, because you can learn to parallel process. You can also learn to be sensitive and understand when people are having feelings, what those feelings mean, and what's the cause of those feelings, and where they come from, and where they're likely to go, and what it is you should do about it, if anything. You can also do that. You don't have to just be helpless, standing in front of a crying woman and wondering, what do I do? I'm lost. What do I do? Do I commiserate? Do I try to solve the problem? No. Yeah. If you understand it, then you'll have a better idea what to do. So yeah, it is good to branch out and be more than just what comes with your genetics.
You just said other hominids. There was more than us.
Yeah.
And you also said that there was a branch of them that were smarter.
Oh, I said may have been. I don't know.
May have been.
Bigger brains. Some of them were much bigger than us. Neanderthal
did they have
was.
this big giant head that went like cone head?
Yeah, one was. The Neanderthals had a head that was more ape-like. It was more, elongated, higher in the back, more sloped to the front. Neanderthals were more like that, but they were bigger. They were a much bigger animal than we were, which means they may have had a bigger brain than we did. We don't know that. Just because you're a big animal doesn't necessarily mean there's a big brain, but they may have been smart. We don't know. Some of the hominids may have been brighter than us. But hard to say. Most everybody has a little Neanderthal, a few Neanderthal genes in them someplace, which says that we just absorbed them. We outbred them, but we were the many and they were the few. So we just have a couple of Neanderthal genes in our blood. But could have been bred. Well, there's other things that have bigger brains than us. Dolphins have brains, I think, that are a little bigger than ours. They have a lot of frontal cortex, just like we do, for all that, manipulation of ideas. So do, orca, killer whales. Other things have brains that are larger than us. We're not the biggest brain thing on the planet. So what are those other things doing with those big brains? Well, we don't know. But we've got these opposable thumbs. We're tool builders. We can interact with our environment better. So we've got more decision space, more things we can do with our environment. That kind of is what makes us different. Not necessarily that we have bigger brains or can think better.
So listening to all this, I'm struck with this whole big picture. I mean, when you touched on in the very beginning of time and how we were able to survive by basically polarizing. We ended up half splitting off with the male, strong, the male, the female, and that's how we were able to procreate and survive and thrive and be the dominant species. So that involved an element of polarization and specialization maybe.
Yeah.
But if you kind of visualize it, it was a little bit of polarization. I mean, we came together in the middle, basically to love, which led to sex, which led to procreating. I mean, if you've got two specialized not kind of opposites, like the male female. Let's just look at it in that perspective. And so I picture the yin and yang symbol, and so we come together in the middle, which ultimately is love. But that was to procreate, to continue our species. We had to find that place of love for each other with a male, female, opposing viewpoints, and so we survived and we thrived, and we continue that basic, I think, almost an impulse of a polarization, because we've got the contrast in the yin and the yang, the masculine and the feminine. And so it always comes back to the same thing. Love is the answer. Always comes back to your, what you wrote in my book when I first met you. I mean, and that is what it always comes back to. And it struck me how what you're doing, back to the whole experiment thing, you're appealing to this very masculine, thinking, rational audience with this theory that will hopefully become truth, which will ultimately unite, bring the humanity, which has polarized so much, and call it male, female, that's probably too much of a generalization, but ultimately meeting back in the middle with love and with understanding. And it's like, to have that happen within all of us, we have to answer to this very, the scientific thing. I don't know where I'm going with this, but I see this whole big picture of coming together in the middle. Ultimately, the answer is love is the answer, and that is what it always has been. And it's by our nature to split apart, but what you're doing is ultimately, hopefully, bringing back together in some way, making us whole again, which is what all this exploring does. Brings back all your pieces of yourself. And I'm sure, really, I don't know if I have a question. I'm sort of making an observation that it all comes back to the same thing, doesn't it?
It
ultimately.
does. Which you can say in many ways. Another way of saying it, it's about other, not about self.
Right.
You see, it's another way of saying it. That's the definition of love, basically. Love is about other. Fear is about self. So those two opposites are really, pretty clear. And all the rest of the differences that we have all need to be, brought together in a win-win. It isn't that one group has all the answers and the others need to learn how to do that. We all need to come together with a win-win, and you automatically get a win-win for everybody if everybody cares about other. You see? So when you care about another person, then you accept that person, who they are, their differences. And in fact, you celebrate those differences, because through diversity, we grow, we get strength. Through diversity, we were all just one way, one thing, there'd be very little challenge. There'd be very little fun. There'd be very little anything. It'd just be sameness everywhere, conformity everywhere. That wouldn't be a growing situation. So the diversity is essential to the growth. So we not only accept differences, we welcome them. And as long as it's about other, not about self, then you're also happy. You're not sad, you're not struggling.
So do you think that how your experiments, your theories tie into all of this is, how do you feel like that ties into that?
The thing, I guess a simple way of saying it is that right now we have lots of ideas, about that there's something bigger than just us at play, that we have purpose, we have a mission here, there's, that love is the answer. We have that sort of thing. But that falls into the realm of philosophy, sometimes theology, and it's an opinion. It's one way to live your life. Another way to live your life is rugged individualism, everybody out for themselves. Self-centeredness is a great idea, And the ones that are better and stronger and smarter will rise to the top, and that's the way it should be. You see, that's another way of looking at reality. And another idea, you know, but these are just ideas. Ideas are easy to toss off. They're easy to say, yeah, well, okay, that's an idea, but I don't know that that'll work, or maybe it will, but who knows? There's all these ideas, and which one of them might work or might not work. How do we know? And people can ignore it and brush it off, which is what they've done with the idea that we're a subset of something larger, that we do have a purpose within that larger architecture, and that purpose is to, you know, lower the entropy of our consciousness. Okay. Well, where the science comes in, and why I say that the physicists are going to have to be the people who kick this off, is that what they're going to do a magic trick which takes that idea of this larger system that's the superset, of which we're a subset, obviously playing in a virtual reality that has a purpose of some sort. They're going to take that opinion and turn it into a fact. They're going to see that this virtual reality idea is not just an opinion or another thing competing for attention. It's actually a fact. That's the way the world works. This is a virtual reality, which makes us players, which makes the source non-physical. Those become scientific facts. And when they're facts, they're not so easy to just brush off. You can't just say, oh, well, you know, that's just another idea, but we don't know if it works or not. The facts are the facts. So when that becomes a fact, it becomes credible. And it opens up that thought now to millions of people who otherwise wouldn't have paid any attention to it. Yeah, okay, I heard about it, but you know, who knows, who cares, sort of thing. Suddenly, when that is a fact of our life and a fact of our existence, people will start to take that seriously. They have to deal with facts. They don't have to deal with opinions. And when they have to deal with facts, they'll have to they will fall through that logic chain that says virtual reality has to be non-physical. There's a purpose, there's a reason. You know, consciousness is a computer, love is the answer. It's all a logical thing to get to that point. Realize that the point is the evolution of consciousness, which means optimizing social systems, which means caring about each other. And if we get there and we get a few 100 million people thinking that's worth thinking about, because after all, it's a fact, not an opinion, not a philosophy, but just a fact. I think that will make all the difference in the world, and it will change a lot of opinions. So even though the physicists don't want to start a social revolution, that would terrify them to think that they might do that. They're going to start one anyway by turning that into a fact, because that will be a huge paradigm shift. And once they do it, they won't be able to take it back. It's done. That big boulder is going to start rolling down that hill, and it'll go wherever it goes. So I think that's what science has to do with all of this. They're going to be the ones that gets other people to take it seriously, because you don't take anything seriously but facts. Particularly in a left-brain society like ours. Facts dominate. All the left-brainers know about facts, and they abhor opinion.
Touching back on how we started this conversation off with the whole male-female thing. I mean, it's almost like we intuitive females who understand this. It's like it's taking this experiment for these, you know, hard fact-based males to understand what we already know but we can't explain. So it's like, again, it's sort of unifying the left brain, right brain, masculine, feminine, into something that makes sense, because it takes all this intuitive stuff that we just know and logic, and it proves it. So that's a cool thing.
I agree. You know, it's intuitively obvious, right, that love is the answer. It's intuitively obvious that the problems we have in this world is that people being self-centered and selfish and greedy and, you know, all about them. I mean, all of those things are rather obvious. It's not like you need a big grand theory to realize that the problem here is self-centeredness and the solution is caring about other. That's pretty obviously, to anyone who's intuitive. Anyone that's mostly right brain can see that that is the answer. But then the problem comes, okay, we know that's the answer, but what do we do about it? How do we turn this thing around? How do we make people see that that is the answer? And, you know, part of, you know, yes, females have been kind of understanding that, but, you know, in the last 20 or 30 years, females have been encouraged to give all that up and become left brain and go become the CEO and in charge of this and in charge of that and deal in the outside world, and that stuff in the inside world of relationship is not that important and not that significant. So part of that female energy now has been co-opted to become pseudo-male energy. And, you know, that kind of weakens the pull from that direction as well. So it's, yes, you're right. The answer is intuitively obvious to anybody who stops and thinks about it. But how do we get from here to there? We don't unless we get the movers and the shakers, which are all the left brain people making the rules for the rest of us have to obey. If we get them on board, then it can go fast. Then suddenly it's not this little group with a good idea. You know, some guy named Buddha started this idea about this is all an illusion and what we need is to love each other and care and that sort of thing, and that's how we need to evolve. Instead of that just being this idea, it becomes a fact of the nature of reality that that's the way we are. It's not a theory and it's not a philosophy, it's not a religion. It's a darn hard, cold fact. And that will make all the difference in the world. And that will only happen when the high priests who tell us what the facts are.
I'm even thinking
kick it
of
off.
understanding all that and the love and the feelings and versus how do you validate that? But I'm even thinking of, like, I consider myself, because I understand your theory on a knowing, intuitive level that to me makes it fact, even though it's really not fact yet. But so I would say that that's almost an intuitive thing, going past the we know that love is the answer and you got to care about each other and blah, blah, blah. It's like the intuitives understand already your theory and what it is you were trying to prove and validate with in the left brain way. So I guess even taking it to that level, it's not even so much of male and female tendencies, it's just more of an intuitive viewpoint versus a scientifically proven,
Sure.
validated viewpoint,
Right.
which is, yeah. So,
That's the key.
yeah.
And in our world, there's lots of left brain females. More and more every year. We've got a lot more left brain females running around now. And we've got a few more right brain men running around too. But there's, you know, the idea is right, we need to come together and do it all. So being right brain and being left brain is not really the solution. The solution is being whole brain. You know, being at home with emotions and feelings and being able to interpret that and relationship, that's good. Being able to function in the outside world and know how all that works and why it works and relate to that, that's good. But it's better if you can do all of it. If you can, you know, if you can wrap your hands around all of it. So we as a species and as consciousness are evolving. And as we evolve, we need to broaden our base. Because when we have a broader, bigger picture that includes more things, it includes the intellectual space and the emotional space, our decision space, our understanding grows and gets bigger. As your decision space grows, your ability to evolve grows and everything works better. So yes, that's where we're headed in a future. And it's not that everybody is going to be neuter. That the males are, you know, are going to turn into half female and the females are going to turn into half male and we're all just going to be neuter. That's not it at all. It's that the women, the females will be female. They'll be feminine, the males will be masculine, and those two will fit together perfectly. They'll really work well together. And nobody dominates anybody because we all see each other as an integral part of a bigger picture and problem. We all have space, we all contribute. All the different kinds of people, all the different attitudes are all a good, you know, part of the whole. Everybody contributes. It's not like, well, this group is the main contributors and they really are in charge of everything, and this group, they're the ones that are supposed to do what they're told. That's the old fear-based thing. And a love-based thing, it's not like that. Everybody's important for what they are and what they do. And it's not going to evolve to something uniform where we're all the same. Everybody's the same. Sameness isn't good. We want everybody to be different. And those differences need to be different such that they work together really well. So that's where we're going. It's not toward sameness. It's not toward more masculine women and more feminine men. It's toward men and women understanding how each brings a very important and necessary part of the picture together, and understanding all of that so that we end up with interesting, fun lives as well, not just sameness in every direction. How boring and unchallenging and whatever that would be. Then we'll start to de-evolve if we get into that sameness thing, conformity. Everybody has to be just like everybody else. That's a dead end. We want difference. We want women to be women and men to be men. But we want it to be such that we really appreciate each other and the differences that we each bring to the table. And we value that difference instead of, I'm best, you're not as good. I'm rational and logical and you're emotional and intuitive. Logic and rational trumps emotional and intuitive all the time. That kind of attitude of feeling superior or better, no matter which side it's on, is dysfunctional. We are who we are. And another interesting thing is we have instincts, and our instincts tend to center around procreation and survival. That's where the instincts are. Instincts develop around those criteria here in this virtual reality. Well, around those, we get the instincts that we have gotten for the last 200,000 years, right, since we've been running around as Homo sapiens. They're very strong. And if you get crosswise with those instincts, you're going to get neurotic. You're going to be unhappy. You're not going to feel fulfilled. You're going to feel out of place, like you've done it wrong. You're not going to really feel life is great, everything's fine, it's perfect the way it is. You won't feel that way. So if you are, if you're carrying these genes and you're male and female, if females get crossways, in other words, in the things that they want to do and what their culture tells them, if that gets crossways to their instincts, it's going to be bad. They're going to get neurotic. They're not going to be fulfilled. They're going to be struggling. They're going to be unhappy. Same with men. So we have to learn to appreciate each other, to value each other's strengths and the things that we do, and to stay in consonance with the instincts we have while we evolve to a new state, to new ways of expressing those instincts. So no, we can't just keep the same things we have. The world's different now. We're not living in caves, hiding from tigers. We're not doing that anymore. There's not bands of people, with their spears and pointy sticks coming around, trying to stick each other all the time. We're not in that place anymore. The men don't have to go out and fight all the battles while the women keep the children in the cave safe so they can grow up and procreate. We don't need to do that. It's not that dangerous anymore. We've grown up a lot. So the women can get out of the cave. They can get out into the world. They can start working in that space. That's good. It's different. But we have to integrate that with the idea that we don't want to get crosswise with our instincts. Women still need to be women, or they won't feel good about themselves. They still need to be aligned with their instincts. They won't feel good about themselves. There'll be something in them that feels like they just didn't do it right, or there's something lacking, or there's something missing, and they'll just have that empty hole someplace because their instincts are like this and they're doing something different than that. They're denying those instincts. And the same with men. They have to do things that are in line with the male instincts, but we have to do that within the context of a reality where everybody can get out of the cave and everybody can interact and everybody can be part of the bigger world, which is new. That's only been around for the last, 300, 400, 500 years. It's only been civilized enough outside that women and children could, get out of the cave and walk around and not find violence. So we're changing. But we're changing in ways that we have to still be in consonance with our instincts. Now, eventually, those instincts will change. But instincts aren't fast things to change. Instincts are slow things to change. And even if we speed them up to where it's only 5 or 6 or 7 generations, still that's slow. There's going to be a lot of turmoil going on as those instincts change. So meanwhile, we have to stay in consonance with or in agreement with our instincts, or we're going to be unhappy. And when we're unhappy with ourselves. When we're unhappy with ourselves, we don't have much to give to anybody else. If you don't own yourself, if you're not happy with yourself, if you're not really something, then you can't give it. If you really don't feel that yourself has any value, you got very little to give to anybody else, you see? So we need to be strong internally. Personal power needs to be strong in order to care about somebody else. Our personal power is really weak. We just sit around and probably wallow in self-pity most of the time. We have very little to give to anyone else. So those are some of our challenges now between gender. Big gender challenges. We have to adapt to a different reality, to a different social situation than what we've ever had before. So we got 200,000 years of evolution, and only in the last 5 seconds of that day have things changed enough that the way males and females can interact in their roles and their specialization doesn't apply the way it applied before. New ways of interacting, but the new ways of interacting have to go along with the old instincts we have, or we'll be very unhappy. And those instincts will change, but it'll not going to change in even a couple of generations. At best, it'll take a dozen generations or so for those to change, but they will change eventually. Instincts change as the environment changes. Instincts are there to match the environment. So we're in a transition. All transitions come with turmoil. So we see some of that turmoil now because we're in that transition, which is good. Turmoil's part of the package. But right now, we are more confused about gender than probably humans have ever been. Males and females both are kind of wondering, what does that really mean? What does it mean to be male? What does it mean to be female? Our gender lines are very fuzzy. We don't really know. What's it mean to be a woman? What's it mean to be a man? And if you go back even 200 or 300 years and ask that question, both would have known exactly what it meant. They would have known exactly what the role was, and they would have enjoyed it. They would have liked it. It would have been a good role. It was a role that they were meant to be in, because things hadn't changed that much for all those 199,000 years. They were all about the same, but it's changed a lot in the last few hundred years. So it's different, and we have to internalize those changes, but stay in line with our instincts. Otherwise, we'll be miserable, and if we get miserable, then we'll start self-destructing. And if we start self-destructing, we're going to be not good for ourselves or for anybody else. And we don't want to have to go through all that misery. Now, I'm just talking here about the fat part of the curve, right? I'm not talking about there's lots of stuff happens in the world. in gender as well as everything else. Some people, it's like human beings, the way those 24 chromosomes come together, I think it is, there's the combinations, permutations and combinations are in the trillions. That's why every human's a different person, because there's so many ways that can go together. Well, you have this big statistical thing. Up here's the fat part of the curve, and then it goes down with the tails of the curve. And most of us fall under this fat part of the curve for all sorts of things. Most of us are born with legs that are both about the same length. Sometimes somebody's born with one leg 4 inches shorter than the other. Most of us are born with 2 arms, 2 legs, 2 eyes, a mouth, all this stuff. But sometimes people are born with cleft palates and with 1 arm and all sorts of different things. That's because they're falling out under the tail of the curve. It's just statistics. That 1 in a million comes out. You got 7.5 billion people. Well, there's going to be a whole bunch of those 1 in a millions around. Not many if you look at the whole, but still a significant number. So there's all sorts of things come out there. And gender's the same way. In gender, most of us are heterosexual males and females, but there's tails of that curve, and there's going to be people that fall in numerous, groupings on both ends of that curve. It's just the way the genes come together. It's just the way it works. But again, diversity is good. We celebrate diversity. We celebrate what difference brings to us. It helps us see bigger pictures by having diversity. So all that diversity out under the tail is good. But mostly in this conversation, I'm kind of limiting it to the heterosexual male and female because that's the fat part of the curve where most of us are. And otherwise, all the discussions of all the various other things would take forever. But so it's not that those other things aren't important, that I ignore them. It's just that it's, for the time we have, just talking about what's under the fat part of the curve kind of is enough. And those that fall out under the tails of the curve, they can fit themselves into that discussion, I think, pretty well. But diversity is a good thing. Even the person that's born with 1 arm or 1 foot too long, we value those people. We should value those people. They show us things. We should have not only compassion and caring like we do for everybody, but it's good for us to have people that have special needs. It helps our caring. It helps us express, the fact that we find other people important, no matter what their physical issues might be. That's part of growing up. So the fact that those are scattered among us, those are people that help the rest of us grow. And for themselves, they have their challenges. They have special challenges they have to deal with. It helps them grow. It helps everybody grow. Diversity is positive, you see. We need all those oddities, things that aren't under the fat part of the statistics. Those are important for us to learn to appreciate what we have, to help others who have issues, and for them to deal with those issues. It's a challenge. You have issues. You come in with only 1 leg, it gives you a different set of decision space. You can sit around and feel sorry for yourself because you can't do the things the other kids do, or you can accept it and go on. Wow, that's an advantage it's a strong lesson, but if you can learn it, you're way ahead in your evolution than if you had 2 legs. You see, because you've been challenged with something. So it's not like that's a bad thing, or oh, it's so sorry, it's poor people. It's just the way statistics works out, and it's a challenge for everybody. Everybody grows, win-win, no matter what. So that's the big idea. Yes, it all turns back to love is the answer. That's the focus point. It all comes back to that. It all comes back that we appreciate each other and each other's differences. So the males learn to appreciate the way women are, and women learn to appreciate the way men are. And they both learn to give what they have to give to make the other one happy. If your life is focused on your significant other in a way that you see your job is to make them happy, however they are, what they need in their way, make them happy. You see? And if both people have that attitude, that they're in a relationship to make the other person happy, however that other person is, what that other person needs is jewelry, what makes them happy, well, get them some jewelry, you know? Paint the bedroom purple, you know? Do whatever it takes. Make them happy. And if they're trying to make you happy, however it is that you are, whatever that takes, then good. And what you have then is two people who are really in love rather than in need. And they are trying very hard not to make themselves happy and get what they need, but to make somebody else happy. But in the process of making somebody else happy, you see, they get what they need. If they try to just get what they need, they just get frustrated. So it's when you give, you get what you need. When you focus on that need, you get frustration. It's one of those very neat things. You know, when you stop trying to control, everything works better than if you were the master of the universe and could control everything. It works out much better. When you stop trying to worry about taking and what you're getting, and are you getting your fair share, and is that what I want, and you stop, it's all about I, you start caring about other, then suddenly all the needs that you want, that you have, start getting just taken care of by themselves. It just works out that way. In as much as you want to be happy and you're going to go out and work to be happy, I'm going to do this because it'll make me happy, it won't make you happy. It'll make you miserable. But if you just grow up, become love, then you find happiness because you're giving, not taking. It's all coming together. Not in a uniform mush of everybody's the same. That's a bad way to come together. That's a stagnant way of coming together. But coming together that everybody's different, and that's wonderful.
I had a question pop into my head last night, and I know you've talked about this many times, but I am having a little trouble really getting it in my own terms. And I'm so aware of the turmoil in this world and the fear and the violence and in some cases the despair. And it's a little hard for me to visualize a world that transforms so dramatically into one of significantly more, you might say, peace and light. And particularly, it's hard for me to understand how the average person is going to go through a kind of a psychic, spiritual transformation and see themselves in a distinctly different light, where they'll feel less fear, be less of a felt need to defend themselves, to acquire all this stuff, to compete with other people. And maybe the trick is that they really are going to see this as just a virtual reality and not a bunch of stuff. But I would really appreciate your helping me understand a little bit how the average person is going to experience this transformation and respond accordingly.
Well, okay. A couple of things. One is that everybody isn't just magically going to make that transformation. It's going to start with a minority of people, maybe even not a big minority as far as the 7.5 billion of us go, but a large enough minority that it can, in time, what is the word now, go viral. It just needs enough people that it makes an impression on the rest of the world. It doesn't need everybody to do that. It just needs a big enough minority to kind of turn on their light, because once you let go of fear, once you learn that you have that there's meaning to your life, you have purpose, you have to decrease the entropy of your consciousness, or you have to become love, and that this is really why you're here and why you're in this virtual reality. And you get that kind of idea, the bigger picture. You see the bigger picture, that there is something bigger than just you, and that there is purpose to your existence, and that purpose is about caring and about love. If just 10 or 20% of the people get that, that will probably be enough to then start a chain reaction to where that in a decade or two grows and grows to where it becomes a majority, and then grows beyond that. Don't underestimate the power of love. If you get it, and just from the parts that you have learned, you've changed in the last 5 years since we've known each other. You've changed a lot, and I can say that's probably true of a lot of people. This changes you. Getting these ideas and getting these concepts makes you different. And how has your change reflected to other people? My guess is there's a lot of other people around you that have changed as well because of your change. It's changed them. It takes two to make an argument. All it takes is one of those people in that argument to see things differently, and the argument's solved. And now you have two people that are happy, even though it was only one that saw it differently. So it really spreads a lot. So if we get a small, what does that mean? 300 million, 400, 500 million, a billion out of the 7.5 billion? If we get enough core in enough places to see it, to get it, I think that's all it'll take. Because when other people see you and they see that you've changed, that you're happy now, that you're more positive, you don't have all that angst and robot apocalypse and other things that worry you. I'm sorry, it's just so much fun, I just can't help myself. Anyway.
It stays fun.
So when you lighten up and when you start being kinder to people and so on, that affects everybody around you. So everybody that feels that way is going to affect 5, 10 people around them that are going to lighten up some. And many of them are going to see you now as an example. Look, there's somebody, they used to be, and this and that, and they argued a lot, and they had all this ego and stuff, and now they're not. And they're going to say, well, what's different? What have you been doing? And you can just tell them, say, well, it's just a difference of perspective. It's a difference, a way of seeing the world. I see myself in a different context than before. And that's all it is. It's not like, well, you got to go believe this. It's none of that stuff. It's just a different context in which you see yourself as part of the world and how you see other people. And I think because the population, probably the big majority, because maybe 90% or 80% at least, or 90% of this 7.5 billion of us do feel that what we're doing isn't working. What we're doing isn't right. There's problems, there's difficulties, the relationships don't work, careers don't work, people aren't happy, they're not satisfied, they're not finding the kind of pleasure and significance in their life. Everything's kind of flat and dull and so on. I think that is the big majority feels that way. And if there's something that changes that turns that to smiles and happiness and feeling good about yourself, I think that small minority is going to be hugely contagious. And I think that small minority is going to affect other people and other people. Now, if that small minority is only 10 people, well, no, maybe not. But if it's millions of people, tens of millions of people, that may be enough. I mean, that's a small percentage of 7.5 billion, but that may be enough. It won't take much because people out there are hungry for something that's better. Really, really hungry for something that's better. And all you need to do is give them something that doesn't require them to donate money, doesn't require them to, swear to a belief, doesn't require them to, change their life, change their career, they don't have to become monks, they don't have to really do anything different other than have a different perspective about the nature of reality and what's important and what's not. That's all. Well, that's a pretty small price to pay for them to become positive like you're positive. I think it'll spread because the market is needy, the market is desperate, and the market is widespread. And the solution works. It's not just words, it's not an idea, it's not a believe this and your life will get better. It's be this, do this, and you'll see what the changes are. And I think that will just start to snowball because we're ready for it. We want something different, but everything that promises us an advantage somehow, that promises us that happiness we're looking for, that contentment we're looking for, it always has a price tag attached to it. It always costs money. You have to subscribe. You have to join. There's always this sort of cost involved. And what I bring is no cost at all. And these ideas are no cost at all. Take it or leave it, whatever. But if you see people and they are happier than you are, and they're smiling and they're connected and they seem to, their relationships have gotten better, they're better at the workplace, everything's working well for them, then there's no cost. Why wouldn't that spread? Why wouldn't that spread like wildfire over a couple of decades? So I think that's the concept. The market's there, desperate for a solution. Hardly anybody thinks this world's just perfect. We could just stay just the way it is, What we need in this world is more greed, more self-centeredness. That's really what we need. If we just had more abusive corporations, we would all be better off, Hardly anybody has that attitude. Most people think this place really needs to change. This is not working out very well. If anything, it's slip sliding, in the wrong direction. Well, I think that's motivation enough for people to want to pick something up at no cost to change all that. And all they have to do is get the picture that the solution isn't to go change those people. So here's the people in charge. Oh, it's those ugly CEOs that are trying to rip everybody off into corporations. It's those politicians. It's this and that. If we get rid of them, that solves the problem. That's blaming it on somebody else. When they see that that's a perspective you need to change. You need to see that, all that ugliness you're talking about is a symptom. It's not the cause, it's a symptom. And you can get rid of symptoms, but it doesn't change the disease. It just keeps resurfacing in another form. So you want to get to the cause, and the cause is the low quality of consciousness of individuals. So the solution has to be at the individual level. It's not fix that corporation or fix that leadership of that country or something. It's fix the people. And you can only fix yourself. So it all boils down to you only have one job to do, and that's fix yourself. And that's your maximum contribution to the whole, is to fix yourself. Because once you fix yourself, then you're also going to try to be helpful to others, because that's what fixing yourself does. It makes you helpful to other people. It makes you want to be part of the solution. So I think it's just a natural what? Virus that is going to be contagious because it's going to work and it's going to solve problems. It's going to actually solve the real problem, not the symptoms of the problem. Right now we look at symptoms. And that's nice for us because we can point our finger at somebody else and say, that's the problem. Get rid of them, they're the problem. Make these people change. And we can sit here and be perfect in our own mind and point the finger at everybody else. But the real thing we have to do is point the finger here and say, this is the problem. I need to change. I need to get rid of my fear. And that's the perspective, really, that needs to be changed. And I don't know that that's that hard to sell. Maybe. So if a few 100 million people pick that up, I think the rest of us will follow. 100 million people is a lot of people. It'll make a dent. I think it'll be catching. So that's what I think. I don't think that 7.5 billion people will one day see a bigger picture. I don't think that'll happen. But I think there's enough. I think there'll be enough around who will see it if they get it offered to them, that it will grow and eventually dominate. And then all those institutions and nasty people, they'll all change all on their own. They're just symptoms. Once we change our attitudes, then that'll just disappear. They reflect us. They're like that because we're like that. They're self-centered because we're self-centered. It's just the way you are. That's just the way it is, right? Strong survive and the weak perish, and that's just the way it is. So they're that way because we have that attitude. They have that attitude. They're just powerful and can force that out on a lot of other people. We're not that powerful. So we're not very successful. They are. So yes, there'll be people who will struggle against it. All the people that have power now based on fear will want to hold on to their power and will want to try to make that fear even bigger. And there will be a lot of pushback. That's why it's not going to happen quickly. But decades, 2 or 3 decades, it could happen. We're ready for it. It's a new idea, and it has to be kicked off by the scientists who make it fact rather than a philosophy, because philosophies can be dismissed just because they're inconvenient. Facts can't be dismissed. They're either, they're facts. Facts are facts. So now deal with that fact. There is something larger. There is point and purpose. We're here in a virtual reality that's being created in some place that has to be non-physical to hear. Deal with it. It's a fact. That'll make a lot of difference in the way people pay attention to this. Otherwise, without that fact, most people, without ever thinking about it, without ever actually understanding it, will just brush it off as another idea that somebody's trying to collect power by convincing people that it's this way or that way. The people won't even consider it. But if it's a fact that the physicists tell you, then it has to be dealt with. The philosophers, everybody's a philosopher of some sort. Everybody thinks about life and their place in it, and what's their purpose, and people go through 40 or something. You're supposed to go through a midlife crisis where you start asking questions of why what have I done? Is it of any value? And that kind of thing. Well, people have that on the inside. So something that gives them answers to those questions, I think, will spread. So that's my hope anyway. I tend to be an optimist.
Would it be fair to say then that what you're suggesting is that a sufficient number of people will step forward and say, I'm the problem, I need to change, I need to improve, love has to start here, and they will create a critical mass that will produce a kind of chain reaction through society? Am I capturing what you're saying accurately?
I think that is right. And look, here we are. Here we are. MBT has 44,000 subscribers.
Don't wait, start now.
Yeah. It's and that's just one. See, I'm thinking about this, but I'm not the only one. There's lots of people. There's all sorts of people that are coming at the same sort of thing from 100 different directions. It's not MBT and me, you know, it's tens of thousands of different people are coming to similar conclusions, and they're coming from all sorts of directions, and yay for them. See, it's not about me or not about MBT. It's about these concepts, and they're gaining traction all over, and all we need is the critical mass, so that if we get that many people, it snowballs from there on. And I think people are ready for that. You know, we've been pointing fingers, saying those are the guys, you know, get rid of those people, they're the problem, and nothing ever happens. Oh yeah, dictators come and go, but it always is the same turns out to be about the same. Some 1 or 2 generations later, there's not a whole lot of change because the people aren't changing. The idea that you have to change yourself and that you're the problem. You have to become part of the solution rather than part of the problem. And if you can get that idea across, then it's not that hard to sell, because otherwise you wouldn't have, I mean, you're just the people who float to the top here, people who donated money and done things like that. But there's, you know, for everybody that signed on of the, I think now 48,000, you know, people who have subscribed to MBT, there's probably another dozen who didn't bother to subscribe, but they still follow the ideas. You know, so it's a lot of people. And that's just kind of grown on its own over a decade from nothing. So the more I and hundreds of other people kind of push similar things, they don't have to be the same. It's just enough to get the general idea around that you need a different perspective. It doesn't have to be in terms of the big computer and all the rest of it. All that's metaphor. That's just a way of putting the words so that we can talk about it. So other metaphors are just as good as my metaphors. We just have to get the idea across. So I'm not the only one pushing on this. There's lots and lots of other people who are pushing in that direction as well. And I think that's because there's so many people pushing, because the demand, the need is so great. Lots of people see it, moving into that space. So I think it has a good chance of going viral, if you will. A happy virus. Oh, yes.
Yes, this is a struggle I've been having for a long time, how to balance, like in business, I have learned to be more compassionate of people when they come in and they're doing business with me. So oftentimes I have taken a lot of hits. And a long time ago, I always said, when making a decision, if you're going to err, always err on the side of mercy, as opposed to erring on the side of who's right, you know. And but I find myself at a disadvantage oftentimes where there's somebody who's more cunning, and I'm finding it harder, and I don't know how to balance and reclaim some of my power, but also at the same time maintain that place where I can also be loving and merciful to those who need it. And sometimes I don't know the difference, and I think it's become harder and harder to make that decision, or the differentiation of when I need to be one over the other.
Yes, that's a difficult issue. You know, you're kind, you're giving, you want to be helpful, and then you run into who we call a user. You know, somebody who's just interested in taking, and that's the only interest that they have. But they see that you're trying to be kind and giving, so they play to that. And they play to that so that they can take advantage of you. Well, there's a few things that that are at play here. One is that you need to be fearless, but you don't need to be stupid. You need to realize that there are people like that in the world, and you need to be aware of it, and you need to be on the lookout. That doesn't mean you're paranoid and think everybody might be trying to take advantage of me, but that you know that is, so you're cautious. So if it looks like it's maybe going that way, you pick up on it or you catch it before it goes too far. And then you can take measures to eliminate it. On the other hand, you're not going to always be successful at not being taken advantage of. And sometimes life is just like that. There will be people who will take advantage of you. And that's a lesson. You learn the lesson. Makes it easier to spot it next time. So every time that you are taken advantage of, it's a lesson learned. A little wisdom gained. Makes it easier for you to not be taken advantage of again. So just take it on as that education is expensive. And sometimes you have to pay the price for it. So you have to accept some losses for the gains. But eventually, you will get to the point where you will be able to see the ones that are users. You'll notice them. They'll have certain characteristics. They may be slick and they may be cunning, but you'll get wiser about not being fooled, and it'll become easier to deal with that. But you have to allow yourself to be taken advantage of sometimes, because the only way to never be taken advantage of is to put up a wall that treats everybody as if they're a user, and that way you'll never be taken advantage of, but that way you'll never be happy either, because now you're just hiding behind this wall, fighting with the world, and that's the wrong place to be. So, it's like the retail stores have a similar problem. They have a problem with shoplifters. Okay. Now, there's no doubt lots of ways to reduce shoplifting to zero. They'll never have anybody shoplift anything. You could do body searches of all the people that shop at the store, You'd have to, nobody would ever be able to shoplift anything. True, but your store would go broke. Your store would go out of business. Nobody's going to patronize such a store that treats its customers so badly. So you have to realize that sometimes you're going to lose. You can only put constraints to a level that they don't interfere with business, right? Well, it's the same idea. You have to accept some losses. If you get to the point that you can't stand to be taken advantage of, and that's the worst thing that could possibly happen, and that would trash your life, then you've got too many fears and too much ego invested in it. Sometimes you'll be taken advantage of. But most of the time, it'll be just the opposite. People will like you. Because you're nice, because you're giving, people will care about you. People want to give back. People will be nice to you, do things for you. And you're going to get a whole lot more of that than you are going to get of the people who take and use. So it's going to be, the net is going to be a net gain. And every time you get used, you're a little smarter. But you can't put up that wall that keeps all the pain out, you see. And people do that personally. My life has been painful. I've had these relationships, and these relationships don't work out, and they've been very painful. So they build a wall around themselves, and now they don't have any of that pain. Yes, but they don't have any of that pleasure either. They don't have any of that relationship. They can't really get in a relationship because they're too terrified of being hurt. So that wall locks you off. And it's a strategy that many people use and apply in different ways, and that is, I can't lose if I don't play. Well, that's true. You can't lose if you don't play. But if you don't play, you will lose. Not playing is losing. So you think you won't lose if you don't play, but if you don't play, you automatically lose. because the game is interaction. The game is to grow, is to interact with people. So the putting the wall up to give you security is not a good idea. That's fear. It's because you fear being hurt or you fear being abused. If you put that wall up and say, well, I'm just going to be hard. Business is business and I'm tough on anybody, and somebody comes to my door and says, please help me, I need help. I'll slam the door and say, go find your help someplace else. I don't want to be used. You'll die a little inside. You'll become a little smaller person. You won't like yourself. After a while, you'll be as grumpy as the people that you're trying to keep out of your way. You'll start to become a user. You see, it degenerates you. So you got to have heart. You got to open it up. You got to give people a chance until they show you that they don't deserve a chance. And when they show you that, then, toss them out the door. This idea of love everyone is not a pacifist philosophy. Doesn't mean you have to be, walked over, taken advantage of. You don't. Sometimes it's time to fight back. Sometimes it's time to, to tell to throw the bums out. Sometimes it's time to, take a stand. But you have to do that with balance. You have to do that with understanding. You have to do that with love. And usually if there's a user and they're using people, then to just allow them to continue to use is not a good thing either. That's a high entropy approach. Sometimes you have to intervene and stop things like that's going on, because it's not only helping you, but it's helping other people as well. So sometimes it's hard, you don't know. So you take your best guess. Sometimes you'll get hurt. Learn a lesson. Why did I get hurt? Why didn't I figure that out? Why didn't I see it earlier? Usually you'll find the answer to that is, well, because I really didn't want to see it. Because I've got this fear that I got this need, I got this want, and because of that, I didn't see it. When it started to show me signs of going bad, I made excuses. Oh, well, that's okay. I made excuses for other people. I let it go because of my own need. I wanted it to work enough that I overlooked the fact that it wasn't working. Lesson. You'll learn a lesson there. The problem really was your need, your fear. That's why you were taken advantage of, because you wanted to believe that it was real when it wasn't. So grow up a little bit, learn a little lesson, and go on, and still the next person comes, it looks like they show potential, put your arms around them, invite them in, and say, come on, let's become part of my game. Good. But watch. If it turns out that it's going bad, then have a conversation. This doesn't look so good. And if you get a nice explanation, fine. If you get a lot of BS that doesn't really compute, now look even a little harder next time. Next time, have another conversation. It's not all black and white. There's a lot of gray in here. There's a lot of gray in here, and you have to sort through that gray with conversation, with communications. And you'll get better at it with time. I know you said that you're getting worse at it, that it's getting harder and harder, but you will get better at it with time. You'll get wiser and wiser, and you'll still have your heart, you'll still have your love, you'll still be reaching out to people, but you'll have a real good filter of, who is a good bet and who isn't. And you'll realize that your needs are often what's driving your bad decisions. You make a bad decision because you don't want it to be a bad decision. So you refuse to see it as a bad decision until it gets so bad that you can't refuse anymore. That's part of your own growth. So even bad things that happen to you are good things because they help you grow up. So see everything as a lesson. And realize that sometimes you get the bear, sometimes the bear gets you. Sometimes you're going to be taken advantage of. Sometimes you're going to lose. Somebody's going to steal your stuff. You know, you'll think something's great and it turned out not to be that way. Okay, life's like that. Learn your lesson and go on. Don't feel bad about it, and don't build a wall around yourself. Learn your lesson and get wiser and move on. You see, lots of people build that wall. Protection against pain. And they live behind that wall and they're never very happy because they're walled off from everything that could possibly make them happy. But they're walled off from that pain too. But not really. They get the pain. See, they create their own pain. Yeah, they're walled off from that outside pain, but now they're full of inside pain. This pain creeps inside the wall where they are. You see, that's the problem. They didn't avoid pain at all. They just changed it to a different kind of pain. They're still unhappy. So you got to take risks. Life is risky. Sometimes you win, sometimes you lose. But you always learn. Always learn. So the key is don't be afraid to make mistakes. Making mistakes is the way you learn. That's the basic idea. It's not figure out what the best path is, and until you figure that out, don't move. When you figure it out, then go. That's not the right way to do it. The right way to do it is give it your best shot. Think about it. Do due diligence in thinking about it. Make your choice, and then see where it takes you. Learn from it. Was that a good choice? Was that a bad choice? If it's a bad choice, figure out why you made that bad choice. That was your choice. You made it. It was a bad choice. Why did you make that bad choice? Rather than just pointing at the bad person and say, oh, it was the bad person got me. No, why did I make that bad choice? Learn something from it and go on, you see? So that way you're always open to new things. You're always moving forward. You're learning from the things that work and from the things that don't work. And that's the way you grow through life. You're never sure that your choice is a good choice. Never. If you wait for certainty, you'll never make a choice. You just sit there waiting for more information, which you'll probably never get. So that's where the courage comes in. You have to have the courage to just move forward, even into the unknown, and you don't know how it's going to come out. Requiring certainty, I'm not going to go into this until I'm sure it's going to be all right, that's the same as building your wall, because you're never sure it's going to be all right. You always have to take risks. You always have to make your best choice, but you always have to learn something from that about your choice and why you made the choice. So you don't have to make good choices all the time. You just have to make your best choices and then learn from them. And if some of those choices turns out that the bear got you, well, pick it up and dust yourself off and go on. Don't be so risk adverse. A lot of people are can't make choices because they don't know what the right choice is. If they don't know what it is, then they just can't do that because it's risky. Just make your best choice. If you think, well, okay, let's go and see how this works out. But don't close your eyes then and pretend that it's going to work out wonderfully when it isn't. Keep your eyes open, be aware, be smart, no fear, but not stupid either. Keep your eyes open and it starts to go bad, question it. Have conversations with it, see. Give it a little more time. Question it again. And then you make a different choice. Now the choice is maybe you need to exit, or somebody else needs to exit, or things need to change. And if they don't change, well, then take steps to deal with it. But don't fret over over making the wrong choice. Wrong choices are educational. Okay, I don't know if that helps or not, but yeah. Yeah. Yes. Got a mic? Yes. Good.
So I notice that when I start to get into a grumpy space because things aren't going my way, which is 100% ego, and I'm a work in progress, I sometimes try to change my perspective by thinking, well, at least I'm not in a third world country. I have access to clean water and a decent toilet. Like, really, these are all really, I'm very lucky, and it does lift me out. But my question is that a healthy way to look at it, or is it almost like counterproductive, because instead of really focusing on, well, I can't change things and that's okay, I'm looking at it as, well, it could be much worse.
Yeah, well, that's true. You know, counting your blessings is a good thing. You know, the Thanksgiving, thing where you give thanks for all the things you do have, will sometimes cheer you up when you're thinking that, you don't have what you want. So, yeah, okay, I don't have what I want, but I got everything really that matters. I got a warm bed to sleep in, or an air-conditioned house to be in the summertime. I've got a car in the garage. I've got a job. You got a lot of things that other people don't have and would love to have, and that can make you feel successful. Yeah, I do have a lot, but I don't have everything. So that's okay. Feeling grateful is good. We should feel grateful for all the things that we have, and recognize that when we get something we see as negative, we don't turn that into our whole world. We have a tendency to take that negative thing and make that, that kind of looms large, and all the positive stuff kind of looms small, and that's losing perspective. So that's a good thing to do. But when things aren't going your way, first thing to do would be to stop back and say, well, is the problem perhaps my way? Is that maybe not reasonable? Or maybe it's just my way and other people aren't me. And maybe we need to think that it has to be, maybe an arrangement that suits everyone, not just me. So you can think of those things. But if you come out with, no, my way, that's the way it needs to be, is my way, well, then you can come up with plans to be that way. But if it doesn't work out, then think why. Why didn't it work out? Why didn't this stuff work out that right way? And you'll come up usually with the reason it didn't work out was not them, it was you. And that may be good or may not be good. If it was you because it didn't work out because the other way would have required you to be unethical, well, then that's good. You have your ethics, it didn't work out, you found out that was unethical, you go another way. Okay, you don't hang out with those friends anymore. Well, that's good. Even though maybe that's not what you wanted, you might change your mind. So just, think about it and learn from it.
Okay. What if what's causing the bad mood or the grumpiness is just like what we talked about, like being stuck in traffic, or one of those days where like everything seems to be going, the opposite direction?
Yeah. That's just ego.
Okay.
That's just ego.
Just checking.
Yeah. I'm sitting in traffic and I have all these cars in front of me, and that annoys me. Yeah. And what you want to say is, all you people up there, get out of my way, because I'm important and you're not. That's just ego. And you see somebody driving and they're wobbling around, or they're doing this, or they're real slow, or they're too fast or something, you get angry, You don't deserve to be in a car. Well, they may be 73 or 74 years old. They may be driving that car a little more carefully than they normally would, because they don't want any errors, you see? And for you, driving behind them, beeping the horn, saying, get out of the way, is not helping. You see, you become part of the problem. And are you going to say that everybody over 70 needs to stop driving cars because some of them are going to be slow? No. What you need to do is say that lots of people need to drive cars. Some of them are only 16 years old and just got their license last week. Some of them are 85 years old and need to drive slowly because their reaction times are long, and that's what's safe for them. And you need to just deal with that. We don't want to say anybody over 80 can't drive, because some people over 80 can drive really well. We don't want to say you have to be 21 before you can get a license, because some 16-year-olds drive just fine. So we have to accept difference, you know, not what we want. And that's just ego. That's just plain ego. It's not the way I want it to be. And things need to be the way I want it to be. So you're angry because they're not. And you get angry with people, you know, and it's the hot rod that's zipping in and out of traffic and that kind of stuff. And you get real angry at them. Well, they are being foolish. That's true. But there's people like that in the world. And just getting angry at them isn't useful. Okay, they're risking their own lives and maybe other people's because of their impatience, because of their arrogance. But there are people like that. You need to learn how to live with people like that, because there are people like that out there, which means you see one of them coming, move over a little, let them shoot on by, right? Let them go on up there and, you know, deal with somebody else. That's how you deal with people like that. You get out of their way. You know, you leave them alone. You don't say, oh, I'll move out in front of you. Now you can't pass because I'm going to drive right alongside this truck, you know, and you're just going to have to sit back there and stew, you know. That just makes it worse. Now they'll try to pass between the two of you, and there'll be a wreck with you and the other person and that one together, you know. You just need to let them go. That's their thing. They're doing the best they can with what they got at the time, and they need to go experience the results of that. You know, they need to go experience the consequences of that, which they probably will one day. They'll do that. They'll be in some kind of wreck or something, and they will experience the consequences of that. Yes, they may hurt some other people, but life is like that too. You can't fix all of that. You have to let it be however it is. You know, so it's that kind of a thing. So you just don't get excited when that stuff happens. It's just your ego. Can't stand things being the way you don't want them to be. Yeah, road rage is very self-centered. Yeah. The self is the master of the universe and gets outraged when the rest of the universe doesn't understand that.
So,
yeah.
I have to say, I was talking to my friend about this. One of the key signs that I've seen that since studying MBT and listening to your videos is that my road rage has drastically reduced. And that's a very tangible example of, yes, there's work being done. So, good example.
Yeah, some people are slow, some are fast. They all have their reasons for whatever it is they're doing, and they all need to do it their way, and that's okay. Yeah, if you feel like that, then there's not much road rage. Okay, there's a lot of cars in front of me. Yeah, that's life today. So it may take a long time to get to where I'm going. I may be late for my appointment, you know, but life's like that. Everything will adjust. I'll make a new appointment. Maybe they'll work me in. You know, you have to not try to make reality conform to you. Otherwise, you'll just always be frustrated. And that's what road rage is, it's just frustration. Yeah. Well, that's good, less road rage. Yeah.
But she's a New Yorker.
Oh, a New Yorker.
Yeah, so it takes even more.
Yes, if you're from New York, yeah. Road rage is just part of the culture, right? Yes. More questions?
This one is kind of related to working on those kind of things. As I started doing my work, I was really working on the physical out here, working on thinking about other and how I'm dealing in traffic and what I'm doing and doing those kind of things. And as that got better, my whole life got better, of course. But then I noticed this other little thing going on, And it was on the inside world where even though you're still you're interacting with people in the way you need to. But every now and then there's this little thing inside that's going, yeah, right. You know, and I guess you're just so used to being like that. And I was wondering, that's just as important as what I'm doing or what
Sure.
we do on the outside world too, correct? We've got to correct both places.
Yes, absolutely. You don't want to just chase the problem underground where you can't see it. Okay, you get the, you know, if the road rage comes to where you stop shaking your fist and giving the finger and biting your horn, and you know, you get to the point that all you're doing is gritting your teeth saying, well, that person's stupid, you know, they don't belong on the road. All right, so now you think that's an improvement. Yes, but it is an improvement, but it's not where you stop. You got to go all the way to the point where you're not even being sarcastic, where you're not, you know, negative, where you're not saying things, even little quips inside. Okay, you stop saying them on the outside, but you're still saying them on the inside. That means all you've done is suppressed what you're trying to get rid of. And it's not, the point here isn't to act better, the point's to be better. So it's not just acting. You see, you could suppress rage and you'd act better. And that's civilizing. Everybody would appreciate it. Nobody enjoys your rage. But that's not where we want to go. We want to be better so there is no rage. There is no anger. That's where we go. So yeah, if it still comes up like that, then you still got work to do. You need to get to the point where that never comes up. It's not even a feeling. You don't consider it. You accept the world the way it is, and if it's inconvenient for you, you accept that too. It's part of life. Life is sometimes inconvenient. Deal with it. It's how you deal with it is where you evolve or de-evolve. If you deal with it with rage, then you're de-evolving. You deal with it, it's okay, then you're evolving.